welcome everyone to episode 20 of Today in the Scene. I'm Joe with Indie Arcade Wave, and this is my co-host Dylan from Galactic Battleground.
Hey y'all.
This week we discuss a game like no other. It's a huge player in the new indie arcade scene. This game has been described as half Joust, half StarCraft, and one giant snail by Polygon. The arcade hit Killer Queen, and with us is the creator Nikita Mikros. How you doing today, Nikita?
Good. How's it going,
Good. It's going as well as it can.
guys?
Retweet.
So there's a lot of buzz about the game Killer Queen throughout the arcade community, and it has been for a long time. I know you guys started doing this in like 2013, if I'm not wrong. I know that was like one of the first showings. But I want to jump right into who is Nick. I want to know who you are and just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm a game designer, and I was formally trained as an artist, because there was no such thing as game design school when I was growing up, but I started making video games pretty young. I started making games with my brother. I was probably around 12 or 13. And this was kind of around the time of Space Invaders and asteroids and stuff like that. So like everything was kind of simple, and like we were trying to do stuff on an Apple IIe, and that's kind of how I got started. And then I went to college and I forgot about video games for a while. And I mean, I was still playing arcade games, but I wasn't really playing a lot of home games at that time. So yeah. Anything? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I've been doing this for a really long time, I guess. I started doing this when I was 30 professionally, and I'm 53 now.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
So with that being said, with all this experience in the field of creating video games, that we already know how it started, but what were some of your favorite video games that you worked on?
I think one of my favorites I mean, I have a lot because I worked on a lot of games, but outside of Killer Queen, which that's a whole other kind of thing, but
Yeah, like maybe like your top three? Or...
yeah. I think one of my favorites was a kids game I did called Lego Space Launch, and and another one, Lego Dino. And like doing Lego games was really a lot of fun for me because I grew up playing with Lego, and I just had like a lot of really strong feelings about it. But one of the best parts was really that these kids wrote to me, because like in the Lego Dino game, you could collect, like when you would find things, you would collect stickers, like, and it would give you a PDF and you could print it out. And so like we would get these like letters from kids because they couldn't find a certain piece and they needed it for like whatever mural they were working on or what. It was really a lot of fun. Like it was interesting to kind of interface with an audience so directly, because most of the times when you work on some of these projects, it's just like you put it up, nobody knows who you are, and like nobody cares. And it was just really interesting to interface with an audience, even if it was 10-year-olds, which is kind of one of the things I really like about working on Killer Queen, is that because we're a small community, it's kind of nice to know a lot of the people who are in it, and that's becoming harder because there's more and more people all the time. So
Yeah.
and then I guess the other one would be, if I had to pick the top three, it would be Lego Dino, SpongeBob SquarePants, Atlantis SquarePantis. It was like based on the episode with David Bowie, and Island with the King of Atlantis or whatever. And
Yeah, yeah.
that was really it was a really interesting game. It had like some really interesting gameplay in it because it was um you would collect these cards and they would be your moves. And it was like a tactics game. It was really it was kind of not what you'd think a SpongeBob game was. There was a lot of really interesting game design ideas in there. And let's see, what would be number 3? I don't know. There was a lot of them, but I did this. Hmm. It might be Pigeon Pinata Pummel, which is another game I did with Josh. Uh, it was a field game, so it was like played outside. There was like teams, and like in that game you had up to 6 teams, and it was bananas. It was just people just running around crazy trying to like break pinatas and then collect all the insides and stuff like that. And that was like it was a lot of fun, that was the first project that me and Josh worked on together.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I guess I didn't even know that you worked on anything like that, but it makes sense because you then created Killer Queen, which started as a field game. So I wanted to talk about the evolution and development of Killer Queen. It has come a very long way since it started as a field game. Can you take me through the journey from running around with foam swords to 2 massive arcade cabinets with 10 players on them and kind of how the game of Killer Queen works?
Yeah. Okay. So me and Josh actually met at this company called Game Lab that we were both freelancing at. And Game Lab is kind of like, if you know about game development in New York City, it was kind of like the place to be. And it was a lot of fun. It was started by this guy Eric Zimmerman, and we always joke around that, if it wasn't for Eric, we none of us would have ever met, which is very, very true. And so we met. He was working on a project for the GameCube, which hadn't come out yet. And in typical Game Lab fashion, it was like, I think possibly completely unsellable. It was called like Blind Samurai or something, and the screen was completely black. You just had to like you had to use the controller as a samurai sword and like just listen to like for audio cues and stuff. So that um and I was working on this game called Arcadia, where you play four one click at a time arcade games at a time. So like the screen would be split into four, and then like whatever. And so we were working on separate projects, but like we started talking, and like we kind of we kind of figured out that like we wanted to work on a project together. And we knew that there was this festival, Come Out and Play, that which at that point I think was like maybe 2 years old, 2 or 3 years old. And so we're like, all right, yeah, let's do a project. It'll be cool and easy because we don't have to actually do anything on a computer. All we have to do is actually design the game. So we did that Pigeon Pinata Pommel, and then the next year we did another project, and the year after that we did another project, and we were kind of getting a little bit like, before we were famous for Killer Queen, we were actually kind of famous for doing these field games. We're like winning awards. We got invited to London. Like it was like we were doing this thing, and it was definitely a hobby, but it was related to what we were doing, and I felt at the time that it was interesting to do a project like this, that you didn't really have to think about production. You didn't have to think about like, okay, I got to make these art assets. I got to blah, 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 blah. It was just literally all about design, iterating constantly. And so I guess it was the fourth game that we did together was Killer Queen. And um, so I I think that we were saying like, well, maybe we won't do one this year or something like that. And then I saw this show about African ants that was just insane, right? It was like all like these ants just destroy everything in their path. And they can't speak, but they can communicate. Like they're doing these very very complex coordinated tasks without speaking. So the initial idea for Killer Queen was like, well, what if you were like one of these ants and like people couldn't speak to each other, that like while they were playing this game. And that was kind of that was where we started. And then we tried it out and we were playing it, and then like things kind of evolved. Originally, like you would leave these strings, like you would leave these like like yarn behind you to kind of denote your sense. And like so it was just this whole complicated thing. And then but the way that we work generally, which drives a lot of people bananas, is that we start off with a core idea, and then we iterate and iterate and iterate. By the time we get to the end, it doesn't look anything like what we originally started off with. I mean, we did this, yeah. So not to get off track, but um, so we did Killer Queen, and we didn't know if it was originally 8 players. There was foam swords, etc., and we didn't really know whether people were going to like it or not. Um, and so come out and play on the day of come out and play, we show up, and there's like these huge lines waiting for people to play it, and we're like, oh shit. And so like Amanda did like line management, and it was huge. Like we and and we thought like, okay, this is really interesting. And at that point, mind you, there was no snail. There was the game was a little bit different than it is today.
Was it pretty similar to like what you guys had at Bumble Bash 4 when they were
It
playing the
is
field
for
game?
Bubble Bash 4. We have the idea of the bomb, which is comparable to the snail,
Okay.
where you have to like push a bomb into your enemy's territory. But like in the first version of the game, that there was no tug of war element in it. It was only two ways to win, really. So we were like, you know, we were touring it around. We showed it at Come Out and Play San Francisco. Then like we got invited um, to show it at a bunch of places, and then the next year, we were like, well, that went pretty well. Um, Maybe instead of doing another field game this year, maybe we could make a video game version of it, and we could show it at night games, which is like, it's kind of like installation piece games that are shown at night on big screens. And like we were thinking very very small here. Like we had we weren't thinking this was sellable. Like there was like we figured, yeah, it's a really cool game, but like how are we going to possibly sell this? And so we started working on the video game version, and then we got invited to show the field game at this big games festival in London. They paid for our trip, blah 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 blah. We're like, yeah, free trip to London. That sounds great. So, but they were really interested in the field game. They didn't really care about the video game. And we're like, and we just kind of snuck it in. We're like, hey, we know you're having a party in like these old abandoned tunnels. What if we like play the video game? Like, what if we run the video game, whatever? And like, so they were into it. And that was the that was one of the first times that that was the first time that we really showed the game in a in a to a big audience. And that version of the game was actually 12 players, not 10. And it was
When was this?
this must have been, I would say, either 2011 or 2012, something like that.
Okay.
And it was in these tunnels, and we had like a huge screen set up. It was like at least 20 feet wide, and there was this there were these seats around this kind of stage set up, and we could not get people off of it. We just could not get people. I mean, and they just, like, it kept breaking down. I kept having to like run over there and fix the USB connections and whatever. And like that was the moment for me, and I think Josh too. That was the moment where we were like, well, this isn't just a good game. This is like kind of like video game crack. And so we were like, okay. So then, we were, and all of this was part time, right? Like we were working this on this like every Thursday night. That was our schedule. And so, we're like, okay, you know, and I got busy, and Josh got busy. He was working on this game that he worked on for a long time called Merryweather, and he was trying to like get it out to his backers. And I was working on this game called The Hero Trap at the time, which never saw the light of day really. And then I was talking to Charles, and he was like, we were both drunk, Charles Pratt, and we were both drunk, and we had gone to see some famous game designer talk or whatever, and we were hanging out at Apple Bar, which was like right around the corner from NYU, and we were just getting drunk, and I was explaining to him that, like, the one of the problems of the game is like the hardware keeps breaking down. It's not like it's hard to like keep this thing going, whatever. And I was like, well, if it was like in an arcade cabinet or something like that, maybe that would be a little bit easier. And he just laughed, and he was like, you can't charge for arcade games now. And so that was the moment where I was like, where like Lizard Brain Nick came out, and he was like, and I was like, oh yeah, if you make a good arcade game, maybe somebody would actually pay for it. And so it just kind of escalated from there. And he's like, well, I'll tell you what, I do the no quarter thing every year. Why don't you guys, we'll give you some money and you can make a cabinet. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And then the next day, I remembered our conversation vaguely, and I wrote him an email, and I said, hey man, we were both very drunk last night. You can totally rescind your offer, whatever. And he was like, no, let's do it. So then that was 2013, and the show was in May, and I remember we were trying to get the cabinet together, and we were like, we ordered a bunch of joysticks and buttons, and we were like feeling stuff out and seeing how we felt about things, and we were prototyping like with like cardboard, like what the distances should be, and just sketching things out. And then Josh tells me, well, I'm going to go to Jamaica for a month. And I'm like, what? It's like, yeah, I'm going to go to Jamaica for a month with Amanda, because she's doing this thing, this teaching conference. I was like, cool. So this, and that was like, and it was, yeah, but I'll be back a month before we're supposed to, have it ready. I'm like, dude, we have nothing. he's like, yeah, but whatever. So he was very confident. Like he was like, yeah, it's gonna be no problem. And I was like, he's like, we're just gonna get Tony, my brother, to help us, and we're gonna just bang it out. And I was like, okay. And I mean, true to his word, that's exactly what happened. And we did bang it out, and we got it to the NYU show. And again, it was like there was like about 600 people there, and it like literally nobody wanted to leave. It was just like the party just went on and on and on and on. And um and that night, it just so happened that there was a guy named Panos Koutsoyanis, who was like a big arcade collector, and he was there for another conference. He was there for some some other indie game conference or whatever. And he had just heard that like this no quarter show was happening, so he figured, okay, I'll just stop by. And he talked to Amanda, and he was like, "Oh, this game is very interesting. How much are they selling it for?" And she's like, "I don't know. Let me ask Nick." And I was like, "I don't know, $25,000." Because I had spent like the last 3 weeks working on it, and I was like, I don't want to sell it. So, so he was like, "Fuck you, that's ridiculous," blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, well, whatever. And then Josh kept talking to him as Josh does, and he really put it into our heads that like, hey, this could be a commercial endeavor. Why don't like, and he had tried to do something with he tried to revive arcade games. He had this whole idea about like putting like cocktail tables in sushi bars or something. I don't know exactly what his scheme was, but he had tried it a little bit. And he's always been very encouraging. And um so so we just kind of got it into our heads. And then we're like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, how are we supposed to do it? So we found a location in Concord, California. It was a laser tag place, and we put it in there. And uh we would get feedback from them. The game was not doing super great, but we learned a lot while it was there about what was going wrong with it, like as an arcade game. And that, and like sooner or later there was like this kind of crowd that started coming there on a regular basis and was playing. And so we got to meet them. And so that went on for, I guess, about good 6 months. The cabinet left NYU, went there, and then it went to Indiecade, and then we won Developers Choice Award on at Indiecade. And then after that, the cab came back to New York, and that's the cab that all the New York players play on. That's the cab that basically won us Bumble Bash 1, 2, and 3. Even though if you talk to Charles, he is very unhappy that is his cab. It's very hard to repair, and it's a little bit of a dinosaur.
That
But
that's just how prototypes go, though.
yeah, that's how prototypes go. It's also a little bit taller than the other cabs, like by about an inch. So that is, I don't know, maybe that's what makes the New Yorkers a little bit more, I don't know, confident or something.
Cool. So, with all that being said, and like all the development you've done, what was like the inspiration for the art style, and like how did that art style and direction mature throughout the advancement of the game?
So for the art style, I think, I hadn't. I hadn't actually done any production art in a really long time, and like I was more like art directing or not. Um, like, and I always I had like when I had my own studio, I had like a bunch of artists working under me, so it wasn't like I was doing any art. And when we started the project and we knew that we were going to make it a video game, Josh was like, "Welcome to Brooklyn." Josh was like, um, you know, I'll do the Unity programming and the music, and you'll do the art, and we'll do the game design together. And I was like, okay, that's fair. And um, and I and we didn't really have a ton of time, so a lot of the reason why we decided to go with pixel art was because I less pixels to paint, and so
Facts.
it really was about kind of saving time and um, and trying to make something that looked good without having like a huge team, which like I wanted to do the whole thing myself, and I knew that that meant that I wasn't going to be doing a bunch of like 3D work or whatever. And so and then I guess the art style itself, like I mean, like the guys started off very different. They looked like if you look at like the early drawings of the guys, they're they look more like bugs. They have like 6 arms, like they have 2 legs and like four arms, and and they have numbers on their chests and big antenna. And like, as we were like kind of workshopping it and like, you know, like iterating on it or whatever, like it became clear that the workers had to get smaller. And so they just kept getting smaller and smaller. So then like, well, the numbers didn't fit, right? But they had these like kind of rugby shirts. So the rugby shirt, the stripes still remained, right? And then there was no room for like 4 arms anymore, so it turned into 2 arms, and then the big antenna just kept getting smaller and smaller until they turned into little ears. So now you have like the BumbleBears, right? So that was it. It was kind of like an interesting evolution that way. And then the original soldiers were they looked more medieval. They had like a big plume coming out of their head, and that version ran for a while. You know, like the first, like before it went to California, that was like there before it went to California, there was only one kind of worker, stripes, and the soldiers looked completely different. They looked like what people call the hot dog soldiers now, and I just it just kept bugging me. Like it felt like the soldiers just felt out of place in this world. Like I didn't like them. I didn't like that like the they didn't look anything like the workers. So I so when I and it was clear that like, okay, we're gonna need we're gonna need different characters because people are getting confused, like who is who, you know. So I remember I did the concepts for the 4 guys, adding abs and um, abs and checks and skulls, and then I was like, well, okay, if I'm gonna make new guys, maybe this would be a good time to redesign the soldiers. And so I did that, and I think I'm really happy with how they turned out. There was one of the super OG players got really upset and quit the game after I redesigned the soldiers. He was that upset. So I'm gonna not mention his name, but he is a very great he's an amazing game designer in his own right. But like I was just like, whoa, dude, it's like why are you so angry? I'm just trying to make this more clear. Um, so so yeah, and I think that then like the platforms and the sky, like it just like the original map was day map. It seemed like kind of a nice world for these guys to live in and like play their sport or whatever it was. Uh, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's really cool the way that it evolved and changed over time. And you mentioned a couple stories already. But I want to talk about how Killer Queen has a really dedicated community
Mhm.
all across the country, which we've talked about. There's tournaments and everything all over the place. And I remember I was chatting with you, I don't even know, like last March down in Florida for a regional, and that was really cool
Yeah,
to
it was
be
in
at.
February. It was at Queens Gone Wild.
Right, right. So, I'm sure that a lot of people that are listening to this that are Killer Queen players have heard a lot of these stories from you before, but I want to hear a story from a convention or a tournament or even during development that still makes you laugh to this day that you probably haven't shared with the community yet.
Oh Jesus. Hmm. Like a behind the scenes kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of something that like I don't know, just caught your eye and you still kind of laugh about because I mean you've been doing this for about what 8 years now with Killer Queen.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many, and it's just like people just have like. I think it was really getting the first Bumble Bash off the ground. Like that, like we had no clue what the hell we were doing. And, like we were promised like that we were going to have four cabs, and then four became three, and then three became two, and then two became one. And like we're like, what? And then I just remember me and Josh are on the plane. We have, and all we have is like chat, like Wi-Fi chat or whatever, and we're coordinating how to get a second cab to Bumble Bash. And there was this guy, and his name eludes me right now, and he was like, "I'll tell you what, I will drive it from, I think it was up down Kansas City, maybe. I don't remember where it came from. Oh, I think it was from Kansas City. And I'll drive a cab, or maybe it was from. You know what? I'm gonna lie. I don't know. I don't know where it came from, but I remember it came from far away, and he volunteered to rent a truck and drive it all the way to Bumble Bash.
Where was Bumble Bash that year?
What's that?
Where was Bumble Bash that year?
It was in Austin, Texas,
Okay.
and we were sharing the venue with uh, Big Bucks World Championship. And I actually made a lot of friends that were big buck players because of that tournament. I um and it just like as far as like community, like I was just like, wow, somebody somebody did that. Like somebody like actually drove, like got a truck, drove it like halfway across the country so that our little championship can happen or whatever. And it was just really kind of eye opening that like that could even happen.
Yeah, that shows a lot of dedication from an individual to drive. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it's got to be at least 12 plus hours.
yeah. Well, I think it was like probably like an 8 hour drive. I think for him it was about an 8 hour drive, but still, that's a lot of time. And but like over the years, I've seen so many small gestures from people helping other people in the community. And I mean there's just too many to recount, but like it's the little things, you know? It's like the little, like, I even see it online, you know, like people saying like, "Hey, I'm really having a hard time today," or whatever, and people will jump in and say and try to like help people out or whatever. And I've never been part of a community this big that actually can show that much empathy towards one another, you know, especially around a competitive game. I think it's really, I don't know. For me, it's humbling. You know, it is humbling. As far as like a particular story, I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to rack my brain around like what one particular story would be. Maybe, well, I don't know. Do you know what an alley shot is?
No idea.
No idea.
Apparently, this was this was a San Francisco thing that you basically, after the bar is closed and you know, whatever. I don't know. I'm not even gonna tell this story. Forget this story. But if you want to know what an alley shot is, ask Dot from San Francisco. He'll tell you. I think, yeah. I don't know. I can't. I'm not. I know that there's a lot of things that we did design wise that encouraged people to rub shoulders, to like to encourage people to become friends. And I think that a lot of that people don't necessarily understand how much of that was like built into the design of the thing. But all given all of that, it still has like far exceeded whatever expectations that I had of like building a community around the game. Like I never imagined that we would have what we have, and it's a blessing. So I mean, I think that's all I'm going to say about that.
So shout out to the community on that one.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
So as you talked about that story from Bumble Bash 1, as someone who that shows off games like Galactic Battleground, what are some of the best conventions that you have attended here in the US or internationally?
I think Bit Summit in Kyoto is kind of amazing. Uh,
That's actually cool you mentioned that because we spoke with Rob about that a little bit from Armed and Gelatinous, and I'm gonna let you tell the story because that's really a cool story.
I mean, it's just you're thousands of miles away from home in a completely bizarre place, right? Like you don't know the language, it's weird, everything's weird, you know. A lot of strange customs, and you know, a lot of giving the cards and the, you know, whatever. Like just giving a game magazine interview in Japan is like I had a translator, and it was, you know, it was everything was kind of like topsy turvy. But what was really amazing about it was meeting other developers uh, and just kind of bonding with them in a way that like you just aren't expecting. And I think a lot of that happens at night, like after the show is over, after all the games have been shut down, and everybody just goes down to the river and starts drinking beer and whatever, and just hanging out and telling stories, um and you know, just sharing their lives as game developers with each other. And I think that that's uh, for me that was really fun. And we got really drunk, and we were in a part of the river we were not supposed to be, and you know, maybe we were a little bit louder than we should, and the cops came, and then we're like, and like, I mean, being American, I was like, oh shit, you know. now we're gonna get busted or whatever, right? Or like the cops are just gonna be assholes. And they were super nice. They just were like, hey guys, you guys need to move just a little bit, about 300 3 or 400 feet, because you're next to blah blah blah. And it was just totally civil, like, and like totally mellow, and just kind of went with the whole evening. Everything just felt really magical. Like Japan is kind of magical. And I ate one of the best burgers I've ever eaten in my life in Japan, about a block away from the convention center, by this guy who's a total Americanophile. And like he's just totally into like everything American. So he opened a hamburger place, which I thought was kind of funny. So yeah, that's my convention story. I think I think second place would probably be Indiecade,
That's
which
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah,
I,
that sounds like a really cool experience.
it was. It
what
was.
was
It was.
Indiecade like?
Oh, Indiecade is complete chaos. It's just totally. It's kind of like Magfest, but on a smaller scale in that way. Have you guys ever been to Magfest?
No,
No,
we
but we did just speak with Mark and them about it.
Yeah, yeah. So like Magfest is also total chaos, and but also a lot of fun, right? And I think that like um the but Indiecade, I mean, it's kind of cool because I get to see all my old friends, like, and I get to catch up with like what people are working on. And so like from a game developer standpoint, like I really like Indiecade, because if you go to like GDC, it's very corporate, and like a lot of these parties for like bros or whatever. I don't know even know who goes to these parties. And like, but Indiecade is a lot more chill. Um, Alan, yeah, I remember one time we were Indiecade. It was me, Josh, and Alan, and we met these guys, and they were like, "Oh, you should come to this party." And we're like, "What?" And like we went to the party, and like Alan was really afraid, like it was like in some hotel room or whatever. And I think he thought that like we were either going to get killed or he was going to have to cheat on his girlfriend or something. And I was like, dude, relax. And we get there, and it's like a bunch of these super old guys telling like their old war stories. And the refreshments were like Coca-Cola, and they had like goldfish in a Tupperware out. And I was just like, all right, we're out of here. Um, but most of the time at Indiecade, it's kind of like the same thing as Bit Summit, but American. Like just like what people who genuinely like games, and like making games, and like to talk about making games, and just hanging out, and appreciating each other's work. And I think that that's really kind of nice.
Yeah, that sounds really nice to like both those conventions sound awesome and they're definitely ones that I would love to attend. I know we'd like to make it out to New York to for sure go to Magfest, or that's in Maryland, right?
That's in Maryland,
Yeah.
actually, and that's it's at this hotel called the Gaylord. And uh, it's immense. I think it's something like 40,000 people. Like,
That's crazy.
yeah, it's the hotel is so big. It's kind of in a shoehorn. It's kind of in a horseshoe shape, and in the middle is this giant courtyard. The whole courtyard is like in a glass bubble, and then there's buildings inside the courtyard. It's that massive. It's crazy. And the
Jeez.
and one of the really cool things about it is the arcade. Like that's my favorite part about Magfest, is like the arcade is open all night. So you can like just roll in at 4 or 5 in the morning and just start banging on whatever, which is really um It's kind of nice. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of shenanigans that happen at MagFest, especially
Right.
if Chipwash is around.
Well, I know Mark was talking about how that's just open all night and how cool that is. Um, I'm really curious about your cabinets and how you got them out. So we heard the story about the first cabinet, the first prototype, and everything. But your cabinets sell for 15,000 for both cabinets, which when you break it down, it makes sense because they are massive and the screens are massive and it's 10 players. So it all makes a lot of sense to me. Um, and you're in 80 locations nationwide or even over 80 locations. I want to know how you got that off the ground and how did you get your first couple cabinets out on location?
Well, in the beginning, it was very, very hard. We, like arcade owners, especially like arcade bar owners, are very concerned with space. They're usually like, it's not like family entertainment centers in the suburbs where they have like tons and tons of space. So they're like, oh, yeah, let's put one of these ticket machines that's like 15 feet tall or whatever. Like they're very cramped for space. And and I remember like we would have these conversations with people. Like I was trying to get the game into ground control. I had a friend who had a friend who was one of the owners of ground control, and like I just remember having all these conversations, and I'm like, you don't understand, this isn't like other games, blah 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 blah. We think like given like your audience, like it should do really well, blah blah blah. And he's like, well, I would have to move like 3 Pac-Men and a whatever. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter, you just move them. So like we had a lot of these conversations. I think the 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 big thing that I think really kind of launched us was Logan Arcade. And I think that like I really when we when we first were starting to think about like selling them, and we had sold like probably I think we had sold about a dozen at this point, and maybe less, but like mostly to private people or whatever. Um and we had shown it a lot. And Eugene Jarvis, who owns Raw Thrills, who I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he is kind of one of my personal heroes. He designed Robotron and Defender and Smash TV, and then later Cruisin' USA, and a bunch of games. And
Yeah, we actually got to meet him in Milwaukee at MGC. He came and played Galactic Battleground with us for like an hour.
oh, really? Yeah, he's
Yeah,
an amazing guy.
He's
He
super cool.
he's and he's much older than me, and like totally with it, and like I don't know. I adore him, and he will tell you the weirdest, most fucked up shit you've ever heard, if you just hang around long enough. But he started following us. He started kind of following us, and we started following him. We went to this talk he did at GDC about making Robotron, and he talked a lot about like how Robotron was coded and stuff like that. I thought it was really interesting, and you know, and we were showing the game in the lobby at GDC at like in this retro arcade whatever thing, and he came around, he played it, and like he was kind of dropping our name a little bit, like when he would go give talks places, and like people would be like, dude, Eugene Jarvis just mentioned you in a talk, and we're like, huh, okay. And so we started going, so we were a little bit like, okay, why don't we talk to Eugene? And so he was very generous. We're like, hey, we would love to fly down to Chicago and meet with you, and just see if we can do business, or at the very least, maybe pick your brain or whatever. And like, so we went and we met him. We had lunch, and then we went back to his office, and he has this like literally one of the biggest meeting room tables I've ever seen, and we sit in there, and we get like a total brain dump. Like 6 hours was just like he just laid it out, and he talked, we talked a lot about like the kind of stuff that we were going through, and like, what his experiences were, and it was like we really got to know him in that moment. And I'm forever grateful, because at the end of that conversation, he was like, I'll tell you what I'm going to do for you guys. There's this place that I like to go downtown in Logan Square called Logan Arcade. I'm gonna call the guy who owns it, Zesby, and I'm gonna tell him to give you guys a shot, and like so that you could put it on test there. And like depending on how it does, maybe we can do business, and or something like that, something to that effect. So you know, uh, you know, James Espy, has a lot of respect for Eugene, and like, so we went down with him there. We met with him, and he was like, "Yeah, this sounds cool. Let's do it." We told him about the game. We told him about whatever, um, and it was James. It was this guy James Barron, who like for all the early KQ players, especially around Chicago. I mean, you know, James Barron was kind of like an amazing guy. He like, he was the tech there, and he would fix all the machines, and he really got the game off the ground. He would like basically show people how to play, and he would like put money in the machine, and like, he really got it off the ground. And in 1 month, they were running tournaments, like literally. And that none of that would have happened if Zespi, the owner, and James Barron like had not done like a hard commit to this. So I really feel like, we'll always, I mean, you know, I I think they're both amazing. And James Barron actually now runs Emporium at San Francisco. I mean, until they close because of COVID, but I'm sure they'll reopen afterwards, or hopefully. I don't know. We'll see. But and that like, and we just kind of started building on that, right? And so like when it came to like ground control, we got invited uh, by this conference to like to bring the game to Portland, and um, and we needed to store it someplace. So we're like, hey, ground control, why don't you just take the game for a month? Like, you don't have to hold on to it. Just take the game for a month. You can even put it in storage, but if you want, put it on the floor and just see how it does. And so they took it after the show, which the show was XOXO, um, and like they were like, okay, I guess we can take it for a month, but you have to have it out of here, after a month. And so, as you know, like then Portland became our second hub, right? Like first Chicago, then it was Portland, and now by around before Portland, like New York had gotten its cab back. So like now we had the three cities, right? We had Portland, Chicago, and New York. And then the final part of what pushed this over the edge was Kickstarter had a machine, and they had come to a tournament, like a New York tournament, and like they just beat everybody. they won first place. They easily, whatever. And like, so the whole New York community was like, well, this can't stand. And so um, when Kickstarter decided that they were going to have a tournament, like it was an open invitation, and all the New York teams came out. But more importantly, a team from Chicago came out, and Dre was on that team. Josh Ecklo was on that team. I think Helen was on that team. I'm not 100% sure. And who else was on that team? What's his name? The guy who would take off his shirt all the time. He doesn't play anymore. I'm blanking on his name. I'm sorry. Anyway, and I think that was the moment when people were like, "Oh, we can travel." So and like the community started getting bigger, and then it just became easier to sell the machines, right? Like then the arcade owners started thinking it was becoming an easier sale. And now it's like if you're opening a new arcade bar, then mostly those guys like usually will call us and be like, okay, um you know we want to buy one or whatever. uh but in the beginning it was really, really rough sailing. It was a really hard sell.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand that with Galactic Battleground. It is tough to get that initial community rolling, and you guys did an amazing job of getting it going from the start with the field game, and then moving into going to what was it called, no quarters.
Yeah,
Um,
but before that, when it was in Concord, it wasn't doing well. And when we took it to the Wisconsin Dells, it was definitely not doing well. There was a long time that we were figuring it out. So take heart, like for all you like people who are making arcade games now and like having a hard time getting it placed, I think it just takes a really long time.
right, where in the Dells were you guys?
We were in the Kalahari,
The
and
Kalahari.
do you know that thing?
I do,
I
yeah.
love the
I
Yeah,
mean,
Kalahari.
like a
we're from
waterfront.
Minnesota, so
We actually
we've been over there so many times.
we actually spent a night there. And and yeah, I think the game was making like $50 a week or something. It was just some ridiculous, and it was mostly the employees who were playing it. So it was a tough road, believe me. It wasn't like we had we had a bunch of like enthusiasts, right? Like people, like we had sold like a few private cabs, like Google, Kickstarter, like these kind of places where people just played the game at some convention, loved it, whatever, and then they bought it. But like getting it into arcades was so hard in the beginning.
Got it. Well, I think that wraps it up for what we wanted to ask you. I'm sure we could go on for hours from here. There's a lot that we would want to ask you, but we'll wrap it up. And to wrap it up, I want you to shout out all your guys' social media so that anybody that's listening will be able to find you easily.
Okay, so on Instagram, we are Killer Queen Arcade. On Facebook, we are also Killer Queen Arcade. On Twitter, we're Killer Queen Game. And my personal Instagram is Mikros, as well as my Twitter. And then, Nikita Mikros on Facebook. But I probably almost everybody listening to this already is my friend. So, uh, and that's it.
Gotcha. And then also the website. So if anybody wants to check them out, go ahead and just Google Killer Queen Arcade. You'll come up to the website and it'll direct you there, especially if you want to buy a cabinet. I just want to thank you for coming on again.
It was really
Uh,
fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
yeah, there will definitely be another episode of this in the future. Maybe jumping into BumbleBear or Killer Queen Black, or I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about.
Oh yeah, there's a ton. There's a ton. There's a lot. I mean, sorry if the history lesson was a little bit long, but
No, we liked it. We wanted to hear that. So if you guys like what we're doing here at Indie Arcade Wave, don't forget to subscribe, whether you're listening to a podcast or on YouTube. And until next time, peace.